Hello and welcome back to the MCC Brussels podcast. I'm Jacob Reynolds. Today, delighted to be joined by Helene de Lauzun, who's a writer for European Conservative. Welcome.
Hello, Jacob.
And delighted to welcome back to the podcast John O'Brien, our head of communications, also the host of our Deep Dive series.
Good to be here.
As ever, please, if you're watching us on YouTube or if you're listening to us on Spotify, wherever you get your podcast, make sure you're subscribed to the podcast. If you're listening to us on YouTube, you can hit the like button, leave us a comment, ring the notification bell, and you'll never miss an episode. This week on the podcast, we're going to be tackling the scandal surrounding the accidental expose on a Signal group chat of American war plans. We're taking a look at war plans closer to home, or rather the lack thereof in Europe as the EU's kind of defense program spins into chaos. And we're also going to take a look at Europe's demographic problem, something that Helene has written a really great article on that we wanted to dive into. So first up, I'm sure few people have been able to miss this a rather amusing scandal where American senior figures in the American government in the Trump administration accidentally invited one of their most hated journalists to a group chat they were part of discussing plans for strikes against the Houthis in Yemen. And also in the midst of that, the thing that's particularly outraged EU leaders is especially JD Vance's characteristically dismissive attitude towards European leaders and European defense or lack thereof capability. So, John, is obviously at one level a massive mistake and perhaps a signal of a kind of maybe lackadaisical approach they have to international affairs, but also there's this element of their revealing kind of how they think about Europe. What did you make of it?
I think, first of all, it's a diplomatic disaster. It really was a huge mistake. But I think the leak reinforces what many in Europe have suspected, that America under Trump 2.0 is far more transactional than it is strategic. European conservatives, rightly so, were very happy to see a Trump administration really expose the underbelly and the weaknesses in Europe, because they've been saying it for a long time. There's something wrong here. But I think what's important for European conservatives to remember is that America first means everybody else is second or last. Therefore, Europe must get its act together. And I think what it betrays really is really the way that the Americans are looking at Europe as being a burden, not as a partner. And I think that, a change in attitude about getting Europe back on track again is something that European conservatives should really be pushing for, as opposed to warming themselves on the fires of delight that comes from this type of very destructive way of seeing partnerships.
Yeah, and Helene, obviously the Trump administration officials have tried to, as it were, shift the blame to the journalists. They're just saying how much they dislike the journalists, but it does expose this slightly almost lackadaisical approach they seem to have to matters of national security.
Yes, of course, people are shocked by the process and the fact that a simple system like a Signal is used by very high-graded officials in the United States. But what appears in the French press, mostly because it is the one I'm concentrating on, is that we can say that the proverb, perhaps it exists in English too, when the wise man shows the moon, the silly man is looking at the finger. And it is precisely the situation in which we are now. People are obsessed by the question of security and Signal, is it a good or a bad messaging system? But I'm not so sure it's the problem. And the French journalists don't want to hear the message that is behind this conversation that leaked. The fact that Europe once more is put in front of its responsibility and its lack of responsibility and its inability to defend its own interests. And that's the most important.
Yeah, well, we're definitely going to come on to that in the second part of the podcast then. John, I wanted to just explore a little bit more this sense that's maybe emerging now. As you say, many people were kind of supportive of parts of the Trump administration agenda, and we can get onto the need for Europe to take defense or its own security more seriously. But there's the fact that a little bit like the first time around, Trump's assembled around him a cast, not exactly of diplomatic experts, which is partly maybe their strength, but also there's a sense that some of the people surrounding maybe I don't know, maybe they're not, some people are saying, are they serious? Are they not taking this kind of seriously enough?
The first time of the Trump administration, I think many of us looked on in horror a little bit as the car crash of various personalities came to play. It looked as though they did not know what they were doing. I would say the Trump administration this time have been much stronger, much more competent. This is not a good example of it, though. It really is a serious letdown. I also think that it shows with JD Vance as well. JD Vance is a bit of the boot boy of the Trump administration. He's been out there sort of hitting hard. And I think, what we see with him is not really diplomacy. It really is pushing American interests. So it's a very different Trump administration than the last time. I think it's much more competent. But again, I think there still is many holes within it and many problems within it that I think could really damage this administration going forward.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask your opinion a little bit about JD Vance as well, because we put out a video when he made that massive speech in Munich about the need for Europe to take itself much more seriously, and we thought that was a brilliant speech. And it seems that, and the texts that were leaked in this chat seem to maybe give the impression a little bit that if there's like an intellectual core to Trumpism beyond Trump's kind of musings on various topics and seeming sometimes erratic behavior, sometimes strategic behavior, it seems increasingly that JD Vance is the one with the kind of big series of ideas at the heart of the Trump administration about putting America first, making Europe kind of take itself more seriously. Do you think that's true, or what do you make of Vance more generally?
Yeah, he's the leading character for the moment, and it's interesting to see that people who want to target Trump administration concentrate their attacks on Vance because they understand that is the future, of course, of the GOP, and that many hopes are put in his character. And what is funny to see is that all the defaults that are reproached by the left, by the mainstream press, that are reproached to Vance, are the things that they praise on other leaders. He's young, is coming from a middle class social background, but in his particular case, it's considered to be a disadvantage because, in a way, he's stealing the weapons that should be used by the left against the right, and not the opposite. And I think he's a very interesting man, and perhaps I would say in a conservative perspective that I would appreciate that he understands that there is a part of civilization in Europe that has to be preserved and not only to destroy the old Europe that is, of course, contradicting American interest. But he has time to discover that.
Yeah, John, what do you make of JD Vance?
I think that your lips to God's ears that he does see that. I think it's America first. I was inspired by the criticisms that he made of the way Europe is a very censorious society. That was very, very welcoming and a very an important statement for a world leader to make. I think, though, that when you have America first, when you have that type of mentality, I think that I think European conservatives need to be wary of ensuring that they put Europe back in the game again, as opposed to thinking that, well, JD Vance is going to be hard on everybody else, but not me. I think he's going to be hard on everybody.
So we've obviously noted already on the podcast about the many contradictions at the heart of the EU's kind of massive rearmament plan that was announced recently by Ursula von der Leyen. But in the weeks after that, it's only kind of spun out of control even more. Firstly, failure to agree any substantive package of support for Ukraine. But most amusingly, the fact that even this big project, Rearm Europe, was under pressure from various countries, including Spain and some others. They've had to rename it, rebrand it, because they don't like the idea of rearmament. Helene, what do you make? I mean, firstly, if the kind of decision that now, right, we're doing rearmament, that's what everybody's got to get behind. But secondly, the way it's kind of spun out of control as well. Yeah,
there is a kind of paradox. We're making everything to involve Europe in a war against Russia, especially. And we spend all the time, no, it's not war. Be careful. We are not speaking about war. We mustn't say we're on because it's a dangerous world, etc. So we are not assuming that we are doing everything that is in our range to go into a war that we fear. And I'd like to make a parallel with something that happened in France just some days ago. We learned that a kind of manual is going to be given to all the French people to prepare war, but not to prepare war. So it's going to be sent to all households with many advice, how much food you have to keep at home in case of a conflict, etc. But the press is spending much energy to say, no, it's not because of war, but it's because of war. And we have exactly the same thing. Here we are scared because we want to prepare, but we cannot consider that now it's our own responsibility to be prepared for war. And it was very symbolical when Macron went to the US to meet Trump about the question of Ukraine. He said, well, we want to be independent in Europe, but we need American support. So we are still in that kind of uncomfortable position. We want war, we don't want it. We prepare it, but we don't want to prepare it. So it's just ludicrous, and it's quite emblematic of the European state of mind nowadays.
Yeah, John.
The EU is a master at semantic diplomacy. And what we see with this rebranding follows a long tradition of adjusting terminology to try to build consensus among member states. It's understandable. If you're in Italy or in Spain, your security concern is migration. It's much more immediate issues that are affecting those countries. The whole rearm Europe, and now we're calling it Readiness 2030, because that's going to be the time that the Russians will be ready to move on Europe if they were to, is about political optics. Words matter, and European leaders like Meloni and Sanchez, they understand the historical weight that is associated with the word rearming. I don't think the core initiative, though, has changed. It's still about boosting defense spending, regardless of what they call it. So I think that Meloni and Sanchez, I think they made a good try at saying it should be about something that's broader. At the end of the day, though, this is going to be about arms, right?
Yeah, and Helene, I wanted you to reflect it if you can, because obviously there's been lots of discussion in France talking about expanding France's nuclear umbrella. Macron's kind of brandishing himself as the kind of new savior of Europe, and he's going to supply nuclear protection to all the countries. And even today, I think, or yesterday, there was a big exercise involving dozens of planes and fighter jets kind of practicing for what a nuclear campaign might look like. What's your take on how Macron's pitching himself in this way?
Yes, it's figuring him as a warlord because it's the only thing he can do now. He's in a very uncomfortable position because he has no majority at the National Assembly. The government is not a government on his own, so he has no power left. So he has almost 2 years and a half to spend in the Elysee before the new elections. He has nothing to do from his day. So perhaps I'm exaggerating a bit, but we traditionally say that political affairs are the priority of the chief of state. And in that particular case, it's the only thing he has left to show he can be useful. So he is deploying overestimated energy in that. Not very efficiently, of course, because for the moment, he hasn't achieved any concrete result. But it's very important for him to stage himself as a warlord, as a man capable of imposing destiny of the world, because on the national field, he's totally helpless and harmless.
Can I just make another point as well? I think that this whole episode really showed something about Callas, the top EU diplomat. Oh, she's not really a diplomat. She's more of an advocate, because that's what she is. She's an advocate for the Ukraine. But it showed that she needs to do much more work and much better at building those alliances, at building that consensus, because this wasn't a good showing by her.
Yeah, I mean, Callas is a good example of it's always that role, which was previously Josep Borrell and subject to similar things. It's always like a role in search of a purpose. Like you're officially the spokesperson, but you're not really representing anything or anybody in particular, and you're always kind of existing at a level of rhetoric rather than reality. And that's one of the things I actually wanted to ask you again on, John, because there's this gap, and Helene was talking about it earlier, this gap between the rhetoric and the reality that I think comes out quite most notably when you see the kind of concerning polling statistics you see in lots of countries about how many people would actually be prepared to fight if there was a war. So they could talk about rearmament, but there's no kind of sense of that social virtues, of martial virtues and all the rest of it that were previously associated with defending your country.
The whole idea of defense or rearmament, whatever you want to call it, is really in trouble. It's really a case sometimes of the tail wagging the dog. That what happens in the European Commission, what happens in the European Parliament, the type of rhetoric that's engaged in, maybe isn't really reflected in national concerns about where our security is, and indeed the amount that we want to invest in it. So there really is a problem in Europe. The idea of a common defense strategy, I think they need to do a lot more talking, a lot more deal making, because it looks like they may be in the same book, but nobody's on the same page.
Yeah, and the problem of callous is a problem of method, because, of course, there is the discussion about rearm or not rearm, but the method she employed to try to push forward this plan was just catastrophical and even tyrannical, we can say.
Yeah.
So now coming to something that we actually haven't had a good chance to discuss on the podcast before, which I'm really excited, and Helene's joining us, and partly for this reason. You wrote a great article taking a look at and giving a chance to explore some of these themes that are very, very popular in the kind of contemporary discussion about demography, features in the discussion of the so-called war between the sexes, features in the discussion about immigration and all the rest of it. But I wanted to leave you to explain the article you wrote and how you're thinking about this topic.
Yeah, I observed a movement that is growing in importance, and the publishing houses, especially in France, but I guess that the same movement can be observed elsewhere. We've had many books in the same year concerning the no-kid movement, giving testimonies from young women saying, well, it's not a good idea to have kids nowadays. So the problem is that in the meantime, two major problems appear. The first one is the publication of the fecundity rate that has never been so low, especially in France, which was a country where it resisted pretty well. We are now at 1.62, which is extremely low. It is the figure that we had just after World War I, so which is usually considered to be the lowest period in terms of fecundity and birth rate in French history. And at the same time, of course, we've had all those debates, discussions concerning the pension reform. And if we put all these information together, you can see that there is a big contradiction, because people are claiming, women are claiming the right to have no child, but they are only on a very either individual point of view. It's my personal development. If I want to be free, if I want to free myself from the obligations of the patriarchate, etc. I mustn't have kids. And you have a macro structural reflection. It's bad for the planet. It's bad for environment to have kids. But there is an intermediate level that is totally not considered by this one. And this is the national level, the level of a community, of a society. What do we do in country where you have to think about the future, and not only the future of the planet, the future of your family, the future of your nation? And that is totally lacking in the reflection of these books. And what is terrible is that we also saw some articles in the French press pushing forward these books and saying, well, it costs us too much to have a child. Especially, I quote in my piece on the EuropeanConservative.com an article from Le Parisien, one of the major daily in France, saying, oh, well, if you have a child and you choose not to have one, you can spare the money to have 8 dogs. And so they made the calculation to say, well, one child, you could have 8 dogs, not 7, not 9, 8. I don't know how did they manage to obtain this figure, but it's just crazy. And of course, nobody is questioning the consequences of such personal choice at the national level, in terms of course, pension reforms, in terms of the atmosphere of society.
Yeah, and John, this is a favorite topic of the MCC Brussels staff when we're either at lunch or in the kind of bars of Brussels. But yeah, what do you make of it?
Well, the no-kid trend isn't just the rejection of motherhood. It reflects, I think, a broader social anxiety, an anxiety about economics, an anxiety about climate change, an anxiety about personal autonomy. Will this affect my career?
And about war, too. Now it's a new topic.
It's about war now.
Anxiety.
Yes.
Yeah.
So this is piling on. In the past, children were seen as an integral part of us moving into adulthood, of taking responsibility, of looking after the next generation. Children were seen as a good. I noticed from your article, the number of items are going to cost you money. They'll interrupt your career. They'll ruin your life. They're ruining the planet. This idea that children are actually seen in such a negative way, and that's reinforced in society, is really worrying. I'm in favor of personal autonomy and personal decision-making, but I think the way children are being viewed and seen as a catastrophe as opposed to a blessing and a joy is really something that we need to be worried about. And I think we need to start a broader conversation as to why people are not having children. I think, sometimes for women, it can be hard in your 20s to find a guy that wants to settle down and wants to have a child with you. It's not just a matter of all of these extraneous issues out there, but even just finding a partner that sort of, let's commit to that. Let's commit to the project of being together. Hopefully we're going to stay together, as opposed to being in single-parent families, which so many Europeans now are in single-parent families. So when a woman in her 20s says, I might want to have a child, she's thinking to herself, I'll probably end up bringing up this child on my own. And it's those type of obstacles, those type of conversations I think we need to start having about how we can create an environment in which children are seen as good and that people can form long-lasting relationships.
I perfectly agree with you because I appreciate this notion of personal autonomy. You cannot force people having child. And I don't like this feminist argument saying, people want to take control of my body. They want to force me to have children. Nobody's saying that. No. That's just stupid. But you're right to say that there is a true problem about loneliness and the question of being single. And the main problem is not having child or not having child, but being a couple. Mm-hmm. And once you're a couple, thinking about having child. And I was mentioning in my piece this figure in Paris, so the capital of France. Almost 2/3 of the households are households of single people. Mm-hmm. So how do you want to have children in such conditions? So that's the first step, in fact, in the reflection of why no kid movement is growing so fast.
Because what changed though in relationships? That relationships are not being formed on the basis of, marriage used to be a religious commitment that you would make to, many people made to another person. But something's changed in the nature of relationships, that relationships are like, we're going to be together for a couple of years. That's not a good plan for a woman who's looking at a child who's going to be around at least until they're 23, with my own experience.
Yeah, for sure. And I don't consider that I can build something because I have many personal achievements that are higher in values than collective achievements, such as a family and having children, etc. And there is no signal sent by the society about the fact that these collective achievements are higher than personal ones. And of course, you cannot consider that you are going to have children for your pension, but you have to consider this question of the transmission of generation. And it's positive to say, I like something in the world. I like my environment. I love my country. I love my culture. I like my food. I like my wine, especially if I'm French. And I want that to survive. And if I have children, it's an act of love, of course, for the man with which you are, but it's an act of love for all these things that you consider that should survive after you. If you do not want to have children, it's just that you consider that all the things that are around you are not worth it being transmitted. So that's a serious lack of confidence in the society as a whole.
And I mean, you both mentioned, and you do a good job of bringing out in that piece, that the way in which you both mentioned personal autonomy and that's kind of praised in some reasons as what people are too autonomous or they're enjoying their freedom too much. And I always find that interesting because it doesn't seem to me that what they're really doing is personal autonomy. Personal autonomy is about building projects in the world, having success in the world, doing things, making relationships, forming yourself through your experiences with other people. It looks a lot more like a kind of sometimes frightened narcissism almost, where you're afraid of commitments, you're afraid of
confidence.
Yeah.
It's lack of confidence. Yeah, but it's also considering that once you have when you have a child and once you have children, you stop living. yeah, there are many things you can do. And so you are not going to be able to travel to New Zealand. You are not going to be able to stay at the nightclub till 3 a.m. in the morning, etc. But because there is no speech from the society saying, yeah, you are going to do other things that are nice too. But there is no positive input on what you do when you have a family. And many people say, well, my life is going to stop as long as I have children, because they don't see anything positive in the fact of experience something different than this personal autonomy.
Well, that's why as much as it's talked about as a crisis of children and young people, it's as much a crisis of adulthood. Because if people have no conception that adulthood means something more than just being like a perpetual university student, going out and drinking lots and staying up late, then why would you ever want to grow up? It's as much a problem of growing up, isn't it, John?
Yeah, it is. The Peter Pan generation, that people don't grow up. I think children do help us grow up. I think children do help us take responsibility and take our proper place as adults within the world. And I think that, we should be having more conversations about the joys of having children, the importance of it, and how your life doesn't end. A new life begins.
Yeah, of course. And you don't have to get rid of your old life either. I have 4 children, and yet I still go to the restaurants, I still go to the cinema, I still travel, and I'm not going to stop because I have these children. I'm just going to do things differently. And this differently is not conscious in the mind of many people. So they don't consider that it's possible. Perhaps another explanation would be the myth of the perfect parenthood. If you are not totally dedicated to your child, you're a bad mother or you're a bad father. And you cannot consider it that children are part of life. They are essential, but they are just one part of your life. And you do not have to sacrifice your own life to your children. And you don't have to get rid of your life because you have children. Children are part of your life. It's not another one.
Yeah, well, this is clearly a topic that we need to explore a little bit more. I know that we're working on some plans in the background to try and bring together some interesting voices to tackle this topic. And maybe there'll be more videos and podcasts we can do on this theme as well. But for now, thanks so much for watching the MCC Brussels podcast. Please remember to like and subscribe. Leave us a comment if you enjoyed us tackling this slightly more cultural theme. Let us know. We'll do some more in the future. But for now, Helene, thanks so much.
Thanks, Jacob, for the invitation.
And John, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.